Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is the season review for Everton's 2021-2022 Premier League season. Another absolutely horrific, absolutely horrendous, absolutely horrifying, absolutely horrible, whatever word you want to use to describe it, even though horrific and horrifying basically mean the same thing. Another truly awful last 9 or 10 months of all of our lives to witness. We're coming off the back, obviously, of a horrible season the season before, barely surviving relegation with a win in the penultimate game of that season against Crystal Palace at Goodison Park. And we sat here this time last year when we done the season review to that season, and I titled it From Free Fall to Fairy Tale. And by fairy tale, I didn't mean that Everton finished the season in a fairy tale manner and everything was okay and fine and dandy and everything was all fixed. What I meant was that Crystal Palace game very much felt at the time like it was a fairy tale ending to what was almost a perfectly written Hollywood movie script that was that perfectly written. It wasn't very realistic, but it actually happened in real life in what Everton went through the season before last, employing Rafael Benitez, making some woeful decision making in terms of the players that we had in the current squad. We had injuries to key players like Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We went through that entire season. We changed manager and we come out of it, surviving in the Premier League after being 2-0 down at half time, coming back, winning 3-2, pitch invasions, flares, coach greetings, all of that stuff. As I said, it was like a perfect movie script in the sense of the first, section of the movie was oh my god, what's going on here? This is, this could be a risk. The second was, section of the movie was an absolute, free fall as I named it, and we all thought we were going to be, relegated, etc., etc. And the last part was fairy tale, coming back 3 goals in one half to beat Crystal Palace. As I said, coach greetings, important wins at home, and I very much felt on that day that we played Crystal Palace at Goodison Park an immense amount of relief, an immense amount of sort of, as I said, happiness in the fact that we'd come back and won that game, joy. I was one of those Evertonians that ran on the pitch at Goodison after that game against Crystal Palace. I was one of those that was gathering outside the stadium with blue flares, gathering outside the Finch Farm, singing and screaming and shouting, and we sat here and, as I said, we spoke about that as a very sort of Hollywood ending to what was a horrible season. But I also remember sitting here when I was doing that season review and almost scoffing at the idea that could happen again. Sitting here and pretty much saying, oh my God, that was a little bit, worrying how close we were to going down there. The anxiety, the upset, the worry. But surely that can't happen again. Surely that was just an anomaly. Surely we'll make some big changes in the summer, bring some big, players in, important players. Lampard will have a full pre-season with the players to get his ideas underway, and, we won't go through that again. And 12 months later, we're sitting here pretty much having the same conversation again. However, this season, it certainly wasn't a fairy tale ending. I wasn't sat there at Goodison Park during that game against Bournemouth with any positive feeling whatsoever. And in fact, I'd even go as far as saying, and this might sound a bit confusing, and some people might think, wow, Cam, why did you feel like that? But I wasn't happy when I left the ground either. Was I relieved? Yes. Was I thankful? Yes. Was I grateful? Yes. Was I happy? No. I didn't go out a couple of Sundays ago when Everton survived, on the final day of the season by beating Bournemouth by 1-0, thanks to a goal that, was completely out of nowhere by Abdoulaye Doucouré. I didn't go out. I didn't run on the pitch. I went home. I had a takeaway and I sat there and I didn't think about Everton for the rest of the night. When the final whistle went, I didn't cry tears of happiness like I did after Crystal Palace. I didn't think, oh my God, I need to get on this pitch. What a moment this is, like I did against Crystal Palace. I sat there and I breathed a sigh of relief and I started chanting "sack the board" with thousands and thousands of other Evertonians. And that's not me having a go at people that ran on the pitch against Bournemouth, by the way, because I'm sure there will have been a lot of people that didn't get that moment against Crystal Palace and probably felt similarly, against Bournemouth and what I did against Crystal Palace. So they felt that they wanted to go on and breathe their sigh of relief by running on the pitch, etc., etc. I'm not condoning it because obviously Everton are now going to get a huge fine, and a fine that we probably can't deal with. But I'm also not going to sit here and have a go at those people because it would be hypocritical because I did it last season. But my point is that the feeling I felt when that final whistle was blown after the Crystal Palace game 12 months ago, and the feeling I felt 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago when that whistle was blown at the end of the Bournemouth game were two completely different feelings. But they were the same feeling. And I don't really know how to articulate this, and I don't really know how to put this into words, but both of those moments, I felt an immense amount of relief, an immense amount of pressure weighted off of my shoulders and everybody else's shoulders, and an immense amount of gratitude that Everton had managed to stay in the Premier League. But I dealt with that feeling differently on both occasions, massively differently. The Palace game, I dealt with it by just going, do you know what, this is unbelievable. I'm going to go out, I'm going to get on the pitch after the game, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get on the ale, I'm going to enjoy it. After the Bournemouth game, I was meant to be going out with my mates. Everybody we'd already planned it. We'd all said 4 or 5 weeks before, listen, if Everton stay up on that final day, we're out, we're going to, to town, bank holiday, we're going to go on the ale, have fun, have a laugh, get out there and celebrate. I texted them on the way home and said, I'm not coming. And a couple of them were like, what do you mean you're not coming? Everton have just stayed up, just survived. And I just said, I'm not in the mood. I'm literally not in the mood. I'm not happy. I'm not joyous. I'm not in the mood to go out and party. I'm not in the mood to go out and celebrate what was another horrendous 9 months of my life. 2 years on the bounce, Everton have put us through two of the worst seasons in the history of the football club. The two worst seasons in my lifetime on the bounce. I just couldn't go out and celebrate and sort of enjoy and be joyous in that moment. And I'm not, I'm not having a go at people that did, because I understand there will have been an immense amount of relief, and I'm sure a lot of people went out and got on the ale and enjoyed it, and fair enough, and absolutely good on you. But I just couldn't this time round, because I just felt an immense amount of anger after that Bournemouth game. As I said, I had me moments when the full-time whistle went, me sigh of relief and the sort of shaking hands with everybody around you and just thinking, oh my God, I'm actually going to see all of these people in the Premier League next season, which 3 weeks ago I didn't think would be the case. And then I left the ground, and the more and more the night went on, I'm sure you could probably tell in my instant match reaction, the more and more angrier I got at the fact that last season I was so overjoyed and I was so relieved and I enjoyed that moment so much. But then I sat back after that moment and said, yeah, that isn't happening again. We won't be in that position again next season. And 12 months later, we've been there again. I just simply could not handle that with any other emotion other than pure anger and upset. And as I said, I was grateful, and it could have gone much, much worse, and Everton could have been relegated, and I understand that, and that's why, as I said, I absolutely appreciate, people celebrating and sort of going out after that game as they did. But it just sparked a level of frustration within me that, again, how many times are we going to get away with this? There's only so many times you will float around the abyss before you fall in it. And Everton have flirted with relegation. Not just flirted with relegation, by the way. You would say West Ham flirted with relegation this season, but they were safe with 2 months to go. You would say Bournemouth flirted with relegation this season, but they were safe with a month to go. We haven't just flirted with relegation. We've taken relegation on 4 dates. We've pretty much introduced relegation to our entire family, and we've gotten to the stage where we've needed to make the decision whether or not to move in with relegation. And for 2 seasons on the bounce, we've gone, I'm not quite ready to move in yet. We'll not let that happen. That won't always be the case. That will not always be the case. And I I've said this before, and I will say it again, and this is the season review, so we're going to go over the entire season from the start of it to the World Cup break, what I think should have happened, the decisions I think the club should have made, all the way into Dyche coming in, the failures in January, and then obviously coming out of it, thankfully, with it being in our hands on the final day of the season. But I will go out and celebrate and have a bevy and be happy and be joyous when I see that notification from Everton saying that Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Bill Kenwright, Graham Sharp and Farhad Moshiri have all left Everton Football Club and will no longer have any involvement in this football club. Because whilst those people are still in charge, whilst the owner is still here making the ridiculous decisions he's made over the last 5 or 6 years, whilst the chairman is still here being a self-centred, self-absorbed, absolute fool and making everything about himself and believing that he's the greatest thing ever, while the CEO is still here who just simply isn't good enough to do the job, Everton will continue to be in this position. And why should we sit here and go, oh my God, what a win against Bournemouth, we stayed up, blah, 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 when there's a good chance we'll be in that position again next season. Now, don't get me wrong, I've looked at the Premier League for next season and some of the teams that are in it, and there's absolutely no way Everton should be in and around the relegation zone on the pure basis that there's a lot of bang average, poor teams in the Premier League next season. But we know that's not how it works. Just because Luton have come up and their stadium holds 15 people and you've got to go through someone's living room to get in it, doesn't mean that they'll automatically finish below Everton next season. Teams like Brighton, Brentford have come up, and because of the way they've been run as a football club, because of the decisions that they make, because of their recruitment, they're both light years ahead of Everton Football Club. When they come up, we'd have said, there's no way we'll finish below them. And yet, you know, a couple of seasons later, and what we'd give to be ran the way Brighton are ran, what we'd give to be in the position Brighton are in. You know, what I'd give to be in the position West Ham are in. I said this last night on Twitter, and I'll say it here. Got no problem with saying it. I was massively jealous watching that game yesterday. I felt the same after that result as I did when Leicester won the FA Cup a couple of years ago. When will it be us? West Ham finished 4 points above Everton this season, and they've just last night given their fans the moment of a lifetime. I'm not willing to sit here and stand for any of this. They've only won a Mickey Mouse Cup. They've only won a Johnson's Paint Trophy. It's the equivalent to a Nothing Cup. It's the third tier cup in Europe. They've just won a major honour. There's not one Evertonian watching this channel, watching any of the other channels, going to Goodison Park, sitting at home. There's not one Evertonian that would not have taken being in that position last night, scoring a last-minute winning in a European Cup final. Whether it's the Champions League or whether it's a fifth-tier cup final, it is still a competitive European competition. And I'm not, if there's any Evertonian that sits there and says, wouldn't even have been asked about it, me, wouldn't have celebrated it, you're talking bollocks. I appreciate that it shouldn't be the ceiling, and Everton Football Club are a club that, you know, should be winning league titles and should be challenging in the, you know, the premium European competitions. I get that. But where we are now, I'm 25 years old. I've never seen Everton win anything. Seen us in one final, and we lost it convincingly. Never seen us win any. And what I'd have given to have seen Everton be in that position last night. 4 points West Ham finished above Everton. And I know they were in that competition because of their season previous, and I understand that, but my point is that competition is a European competition, a competitive competition that Everton, if Everton were to be in and win it, it would be seen as a major cup trophy. And it was being won by a team that finished 4 points above Everton. When will it be our turn to have enjoyment? When will it be our turn as Evertonians to actually see our team succeed? Well, I can answer that. Not until the current people in charge of this football club have been moved on. And that is as simple as it gets. Nothing will change until something changes. And that might seem like the most Michael Owen statement, but listen to that statement. Nothing will change until something changes. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. John says, Cam, get real. West Ham have won a minor trophy, just a little scrap that the big clubs have tossed out on. I don't care, John. I don't care. I would have given a limb to have watched Everton win that trophy last night. What's better, winning a minor trophy that none of the big clubs want, or not winning anything? Anyway, let's get into the season review. As I said, I just wanted to, have that little conversation at the start of the video because I don't feel the way I did last season. I feel as grateful and I feel as relieved as I did last season, but I haven't nursed that energy in the same way as I did last season. I'm not sitting here thinking massively positively about the future, and I'm not sitting here thinking, oh my God, everything is going to be all right, and we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do the other. I am worried, and the title of this video reads, "This simply can't happen again," and it can't. It can't be allowed to happen again. Where's the accountability? Where is the responsibility? I would love to sit down with Dyche, Barrett, Baxendale, Bill Kenwright, Farhad Moshiri, and just say, not even have a go at them or be personal or whatever. I'd just love to sit down and say, why are Everton in this position? Why? Why are Everton in this position? And I guarantee you not one of them would say, probably because we have made some awful decisions and we're not very good at our jobs. Not one of them would. Not one of them would take accountability. Not one of them would take responsibility. Not one of them would hold their hands up and go, do you know what? Yeah, actually, that's probably my fault. Or that's probably our fault. Not one of them would. They would blame it all on just being unlucky. And probably they'd blame it on COVID, and probably they'd blame it on players wanting to leave. They'd just blame it all on everything else apart from themselves. When in reality, they are the biggest reason. They are the reason we are in this position and have been in this position for the last 2 seasons on the bounce. It's as simple as that. Anyway, season review. Let's get right into it. Obviously, as we've just mentioned, Everton surviving on the final game of the season. Something that I hope we never have to go through again, because that Bournemouth game truly was one of the worst experiences of my life. And I don't even say that in it being exaggerating. I don't even say that to try and boost numbers. I don't say it for a laugh. It genuinely was one of the worst experiences of my life. It's as simple as that. Even when the final whistle went, as I said, I was relieved, and I was I let out a roar of thankfulness, but I wasn't happy. The only moment I was genuinely overjoyed with happiness in that game was when Abdoulaye Doucouré scored, because it was at that point that I could see Everton staying up. Before that, did we have many big chances to score? We had a couple of penalty shouts, but other than that, it wasn't like we did the post and we did the bar and we'd created 4 or 5 big chances and you were sitting there going, do you know what, we're going to score here. We didn't look like scoring. But anyway, that was the final day of the season. Let's talk about the season as a whole. So obviously, Everton started the season with 2 straight defeats. The fixture list come out, and as soon as we saw that we were playing Chelsea at home on the opening game of the season, this of course was a very different Chelsea to the one that has ended the season. It was always going to be a difficult game, especially coming off the back of what was a horrendous season last season. But I want to take it further before that Chelsea game, because I think it's important to talk a little bit, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about the summer transfer window, pre-season, and just where Everton went wrong. So, first and foremost, we'd obviously signed James Tarkowski on the opening day of the transfer window, a deal that was rumoured to have been done for about a month before so, but obviously wasn't announced because of a couple of things. One of them being he was still contracted to Burnley until the final day of June, I believe, and another one being the new kit hadn't been revealed, and therefore you can't announce a player in a kit that he won't be playing in, so they had to wait for the new kit to be revealed, and the new kit wasn't revealed because of sponsorship problems with Stake and Kazoo, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, James Tarkowski was announced on the 1st of July, I believe. And then we didn't really have anything else for weeks. Absolute weeks. I mean, if we have a look on the signings videos that I did, Ruben Vinagre was the next player to sign for Everton after James Tarkowski. And if you just bear with me 2 seconds, I'll get the date up. Ruben Vinagre signed for Everton on the 27th of July. So 26 days after the signing of James Tarkowski, after the pre-season tour in America, Ruben Van Aangelen's first game for Everton was against Dynamo Kiev, as was Dwight McNeil's, who signed on the 28th of July. And then obviously he was followed by the likes of Amadou Onana. Garner Gay obviously signed on deadline day with James Garner. Amadou Onana signed on the 9th of August. So from the 1st of July to the 27th of July, Everton went on a pre-season tour in mid-July. I was there, went over to America, played and lost to Arsenal. Okay, losing to an Arsenal team that ultimately went on to challenge for the title. Not the worst thing in the world. Played and lost convincingly to Minnesota and looked dreadful against Minnesota. And I remember thinking then, I was sitting there with Baz and Ped and Matty and, John and some of the other, lads that and ladies that we went away with. And I remember sitting there then thinking, I am not confident going into the season. And I remember a couple of people going, oh, calm, it's only pre-season. Minnesota are in the middle of their season. They're much fitter than we are. It's different circumstances, the heat, etc., etc. And I just couldn't have it. There was just a big part of me that thought, what I've just witnessed on the Allianz field, I was there myself in person for both games, and what I'd witnessed on that night wasn't that of just a pre-season game where the players weren't particularly ready and they weren't as fit as the opposition. It was a demolition by a side that, no disrespect to Minnesota, and I've got a lot of time for Minnesota, as I'm sure you'll all know, but a team that shouldn't really have been able to do that to Everton. And it wasn't just the defeat in a pre-season game. It was the way in which we performed. Tactically, we looked so bad. The players' attitudes didn't look like, they particularly wanted to play. Positionally, players looked uncomfortable. They didn't look like they knew what they were doing. They didn't look like they knew, where to be or where to go, or like they were particularly coached well. Going forward, we had very little going forward. Defensively, we were all over the gaff. And I remember sitting there thinking, it's very easy to look and go, well, it's only a pre-season game. And yes, results don't really matter over pre-season. But what matters is performance. And if we'd have seen a good performance there and tactically a performance where you could see that Frank Lampard was trying to implement a style of play and the players were reacting to it and responding to it and we were good going forward and free-flowing and we'd have lost the game 2-0, had they come out and gone, do you know what, I can see what he's trying to do there, and it is early days and it's pre-season, that'll get better, but I can see what he's trying to do. I walked out at the Allianz Field and I distinctly remember standing in the McDonald's that is just over the road from there and looking at Matty and saying, we looked abject. We looked all over the place. There didn't seem to be any plan. And that was mid-July, the 19th of July, whatever it was, 20th of July, that game. Less than a month away from the Premier League season starting, and we looked all over the place. We'd signed one player. And that's where Everton's biggest problem was in the summer. And Everton's biggest problem has been over the years is that we have got a tendency of waiting in transfer markets. We signed Amadou Onana in August. We signed James Garner and Garner Guy on the final day of the season. We signed Ruben Van Aangeleen on the 27th of July and Dwight McNeil on the 28th of July. After our two pre-season games were played, after the tour in America. Now, yes, obviously we played a couple of pre-season games after that. We played one, obviously, against Dynamo Kiev. I think we played one against the championship team as well. I can't remember who it was, sorry, a local team. But the main pre-season games, the times that you'd want players to come in and get embedded and be working with the manager and be working with the teammates, we only had James Tarkowski in. It was really, really poor, and it was another example of Everton not being prepared. You can't seriously sit there and tell me that if Dwight McNeil was Everton's number one option in the summer, that they couldn't have had that deal done in the first week of July and he could have been on that plane to America. I refuse to believe that that was such a difficult deal to complete with a team that had just been relegated, who were in a massively transitional stage anyway, that it took 20 odd days to complete that deal after the transfer window had opened. Not a chance. Not a chance. A loan deal for Ruben Vinagre. You're telling me that took 20 odd days to complete? No. What it was Everton once again sitting on their hands and thinking, oh, well, we'll do that next week, or we'll make that move the week after, or we'll do that, we'll do that when we can be asked. No proactiveness, just reactiveness, and that was the start of the problems. We then obviously, brought in Dwight McNeil. We brought in Garner Gay, James Garner, etc., etc., and we'd lost Richarlison. So we already knew going into this season we'd lost one of the players that pretty much kept Everton in the Premier League the season before. We knew that. We knew that coming into the season. How do we manage that? How do we deal without him? We went out and we brought Dwight McNeil in, who turned out to have a really good season, and as I'm sure you all will know, I'm a massive, massive fan of. But at the time, had scored one Premier League goal in his previous season and had just been relegated. Was he ever going to be able to come in and replace what we had with Richarlison? No, he wasn't. We brought Neil Maupay in, who was a completely different striker to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and the way in which Dominic Calvert-Lewin plays, and the stature of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, you couldn't get more opposite than Neil Maupay. But we brought Neil Maupay in. I'd say the only real transfer that anybody was hugely excited about was Amadou Onana in the summer. And that was worrying, considering the season we just had prior. But anyway, as I said, I was worried from that Minnesota game because we just looked so bad. It looked like there was no tactical plan by the manager. Anyway, we get to the opening game of the season. We play Chelsea at home. Again, one of them that we'd sort of, I think most Evertonians have gone into thinking if we can get something, because we're playing Chelsea at home, we have a good record against Chelsea at Goodison, etc., etc., then it would be a bonus. If not, it's not the end of the world. Chelsea, as I said, at the time, were viewed as a good outfit. They had Thomas Tuchel at that time. It was always going to be a difficult game for Everton to get anything out of. We lost the game 1-0. It was a penalty by Jorginho. Again, not the end of the world. Not the end of the world. We then go to Villa, and I was there on this day. It was about 48 degrees. We were in the absolute heavens, the top row of the away end, so it was boiling hot. And we lose 2-1 to Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa, by the way. A team that I'm pretty sure that was Gerrard's only win for about 6 weeks against Everton. And again, another disappointing result and another disappointing sort of performance, but one that you could say, well, it's again, first away game of the season, difficult place to go. Villa, obviously, we're confident, their first home game, etc., etc. Not the end of the world. The next game was when I started to worry a little bit. Nottingham Forest. We drew 1-1, but if you remember, we were losing that game until near enough the last 5 minutes of it when Damari Gray scored the equaliser. 70 odd minutes into that game, I remember sitting here thinking, well, not sitting here, I remember sitting at Goodison thinking, yeah, there's absolutely no way Lampard makes it out of the year. There's no way. Because we just looked so void of ideas. We looked so abject. We looked so poor. And because of the fact that we'd merely survived relegation the season before, to lose your first 3 games of the following season was always going to be a disaster. We got the equaliser, and you were sort of hoping that that would be the catalyst for us to move forward then. And in hindsight, Forest at home was one of them games that we should have been winning, and had we have won, and a couple of other games that were very winnable, we wouldn't have been in that position. We then went to Fleetwood on the following Tuesday in the Cup. We won 1-0 there. And again, you're thinking, okay, a point at home, a win in the Cup. Let's go and move on from there. We went to Brentford, winning that game. They pulled it back with 10 minutes to go. A good performance, though. A good, positive performance. I was there and I remember watching it and I remember thinking, do you know what? That's not too bad. That I can see something there. I can see, positives. We then went on that period of 5 or 6 games without defeat. As I said, we drew with Brentford 1-1. We drew with Leeds 1-0. We should have won that game. We scored a perfectly good goal that was ruled offside. Again, a good, hard-working performance away from home. We then won our first game of the season. So at this point, we were 6 games unbeaten. 5 games unbeaten in the Premier League, and we just got our first win. This was at the time when, obviously, Dominic Calvert-Lewin was out injured, so it become quite evident that we were struggling to score goals. The reason, sorry, I sounded like Roy Hodgson there. The reason we were drawing games, obviously we drew with Liverpool at home. In that as well, 0-0. Again, unfortunate. A goal, ruled offside for Conor Cody's toe being offside. But again, we weren't losing. And we weren't losing because defensively we were so solid. Lampard had found the partnership of Conor Cody and James Tarkowski. Conor Cody obviously coming in the summer as well, I forgot to mention before. And that partnership had really kicked on at the start of the season. Positive performances, defensively really strong. The leadership of Conor Cody was on show. I remember there was a clip of him just before the Aston Villa game, basically, riling everybody up, giving the clap, giving the arms up to his teammates. And I remember watching it just thinking, wow, we have not had that at Everton Football Club for years. That is massive, absolutely massive. And as I said, that partnership and that defensive structure, Nathan Patterson had started the season really, really well. He was tenacious, he was battling, he was, I remember he was absolutely excellent in the Merseyside derby. He kept Luis Diaz, incredibly quiet. He was in the face of people, he was battling. And that whole back line, including Jordan Pickford, was really, really solid. And the question then was always, if we can just get it right up front, if Neil Maupay can just settle down and find his form a little bit, then we could be alright here. As I said, we drawed against Leeds. Again, a game we should have won. We drawed against Liverpool. A game we were very unlucky in. A goal disallowed by a toenail. And then we go and get our first win. 18th of September, first win of the season against West Ham United. 1-0. Maupay scores. Excellent. Great. We've defensively been very good recently. Defensively very good in that game. And we go and get the first win of the season. Now let's kick on now. Let's go and get another win. We then face Southampton and we get our first away win of the season. 2-1. We go 1-0 down and within 5 minutes we're 2-1 up. I was there. I flew about 5 rows in front of me. Unbelievable scenes. 2 wins on the bounce. I think it's the first time that Frank Lampard did that season, and the only time, including his time at Chelsea. But yeah, 2 wins on the bounce, huge, massive result. Moved us to 11th in the Premier League table. We hadn't lost a game at this point since that Aston Villa game. Our performances were getting better. Defensively, as I said, we were continuing to be strong, and we were looking a bit more tenacious going forward. We were looking a bit more positive going forward. And then we had a few really, really difficult games. And it was always going to be, can you get out of these difficult games with anything? We had Man United at home, and I was at all 3 of these. Man United at home, Wolby scores early on. Can we keep in it? Can we can we hold on? Can we go and get something? We end up losing the game. Again, frustrating, not the end of the world. We've lost to a team that we always knew was going to be a threat. We always knew was going to cause problems. Next game, Tottenham away, 2-0 defeat. Frustrating. But you have to contextualise who we were and what we were at that time, we were not a great side. So would you have said at the start of the season Tottenham away would have been a winnable game? Probably not. We've lost it. We move on. Newcastle away. This one here particularly because it was on a Wednesday night. It was freezing cold. We were miles in the air, and it was a really bad performance. And at this stage, it wasn't necessarily the defeats we'd had. It was the performances we'd had. The Tottenham performance was atrocious. The Man United second half performance was atrocious. The Newcastle performance was atrocious. So we'd had a period of we'd started the season poorly. We then had a period of, we were all right. As I said, we scraped the draw against Forest. We were probably unlucky against Brentford and Leeds in the sense of that Brentford scored the last 10 minutes. Leeds, we had the goal disallowed. We were unlucky against Liverpool in the derby. We beat West Ham. We beat Southampton. But then the performances really took a hit. We didn't just lose these games that you would expect to lose. We lost them, and we looked abject. We looked poor. We looked uninterested. Again, we started to see those types of performances similar to that one against Minnesota in pre-season, where players were almost just running around going, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to be doing here. We lose to Tottenham. We then lose to Newcastle away. But then, the next home game, one that you would look at and go, you should win this. We won 3-0. Arguably our best performance of the season, barring the Brighton game, of course. Certainly our best performance under Lampard. McNeil, Gordon, Calvert-Lewin, we were all in free flow. It was excellent. Could have been 4 or 5 on the day. And Lampard, once again, is giving the benefit of the doubt. He got the benefit of the doubt after the Villa game, which was a really poor defeat. Got the benefit of the doubt after Forest when we barely got a point out of that one. And he got the benefit of the doubt after 3 defeats on the bounce, because of what was a really, really good win. And the benefit of the doubt was, well, United, difficult game, and then Tottenham and Newcastle away, tough. We then played Fulham away, a draw, a game at the time that people were looking at, certainly me, thinking we should go out and win, because ultimately, again, Fulham at this time weren't the Fulham that ended the season. They weren't in great form, and you would have liked to have hoped that we'd go and get a win there. We didn't. We drew. Every season, Everton have a number of 0-0 away games, don't they? Where we just go away and it's the most boring 90 minutes of your life, and you lose and you draw 0-0. And I can't even remember much about this game, but I just remember thinking beforehand we should go in and win this, and we didn't. And then we had another 3 defeats on the bounce, but this time it wasn't Man United, Tottenham, Newcastle. It was a Leicester team who were in terrible form at the time and ultimately went to get relegated 2-0 at Goodison. That moved us to 16th in the league. We jumped from 12th to 16th. We then lost 4-1 in the League Cup to Bournemouth on a Tuesday night. And then a few days later on the Saturday night, we lost 3-0. 7-1 to a Bournemouth team who, once again at the time, everybody was looking at and saying they are nailed on to go down. Nailed on to go down. We lost 7-1 over 2 games within a week to them. And it was at that point that Frank Lampard should have lost his Everton job. I'll say it. I've said it before. I will say it again. At this point, Everton had played what? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 Premier League games. 15 Premier League games. We'd won 3 out of 15. We'd lost 8. And obviously we had those draws at the start of the season, which kept him in a job. Effectively, had we have lost a couple of them, he'd have been no chance. But to lose 8 out of 15 games going into the World Cup break and to keep your job was a decision that shows for me the complete and utter lack of any real bollocks amongst those decision makers at Everton Football Club. Cowardly decision. Was his position absolutely untenable at this point? No, probably not. However, it was quite blatantly obvious that losing 7-1 over 2 games to Bournemouth in a week and losing 3 games on the bounce against Bournemouth twice and Leicester at home, in the way we did and the performances we put in, it was quite obvious that Frank Lampard was not going to see the season out. Whether he was sacked at that point, whether he was sacked a week later, well, obviously a couple of weeks later, given there was a break, whether he was sacked a few weeks after that, it was quite obvious at that point that Frank Lampard was going to lose his job at some point. And this board and these people in charge cowardly didn't have the balls, as I said, the metaphorical balls to make that decision. Had they have made that decision, Everton would have gone into the mid-season World Cup break, gone over to Australia for their mid-season, pre-season, if you like, and had a new manager, new ideas, new way of thinking. If it was to be Dyche, he'd have had another, a couple of weeks to work with the players, 4, 5, 6 weeks to work with the players before the Premier League season would have started. And then we come back with some very, very winnable games that would, had we have won, which I think it would have been, if Dyche had been in charge, we would have won. We wouldn't have been in that position where we needed to beat Bournemouth on the final day of the season. But those people in charge did not make those decisions, because once again, in the same way as that they waited until the end of July and midway through August to make any signings, in the same way as that they have waited with previous managers, they sat on their hands, they hid, and they said, we don't want to make this decision until it is abundantly clear that we have to make this decision. Most other Premier League clubs would have made that decision then. Aston Villa sacked Steven Gerrard before this point, went out, got Unai Emery, and for a team that under Gerrard looked like they would have been fighting relegation, and they would have been fighting relegation had they have kept Steven Gerrard, because he was is a truly woeful football manager. Same with Frank Lampard, by the way. They sacked him early. There was a bit of, is it too early? Is it being harsh? Villa just went, not bothered, not good enough. Sacked them, went out and got Unai Emery, and they'll be playing European football next season. They'll be playing in the same competition that West Ham have just won, and there's a good chance Aston Villa will win it next season. That is what you call proactive decision-making and not being scared to make a change. What Everton did was what you call cowardly, once again. They allowed Frank Lampard to continue in his job. We went over to Australia. He won a couple of pre-season, mid-season friendlies, whatever you want to call them. Great. We come back, Boxing Day, we lose to Wolves. Now, at that point, I was sitting there scratching my head, thinking, how? How is he still in a job? How on this earth has Frank Lampard not been relieved of his duties? We've just lost to a Wolves team who, again, I don't mean any disrespect when I say this, but we were losing not just to Bournemouth, but a Bournemouth team that were dreadful at the time and were fighting relegation and looked absolutely horrendous. When we drew with Fulham, they weren't particularly good themselves at the time. When we lost to Wolves were in a really poor run of form and were struggling. And this was at Goodison. Lampard's job was then once again saved by a miracle result against Manchester City at the Etihad. How we managed to draw that game, I will never know. 1-1 to Mari Gray with a beautiful goal, and we get a point out of it. Moves us to 16th instead of 17th. But at this point, by the way, we are post-Christmas now. We've just finished outside of the relegation zone, barely survived. We are now post-Christmas, and Everton have spent a whopping 0 days in the top half of the table. 0 days, not even at the start of the season, 0 days. And we were 17th at the time, going into that game against Manchester City. Post-Christmas, second half of the season, obviously there'd been a World Cup break, so it's different, I understand that. But we were in just outside, of the relegation zone post-Christmas. How he stayed in that job, I will never, ever, ever, ever know. It was clear at that time that his football wasn't good enough, his decision-making wasn't good enough, the players weren't playing for him, he wasn't making much of an argument for himself in press conferences, but somehow we managed to miraculously grab a point at the Etihad, which keeps him in a job. How, I'll never know. We then played Brighton at Goodison. Now, okay, Brighton are a decent team, and we're a decent team at this time. We lost 4-1. And we were battered in that game, by the way. We scored a penalty when we were 4-0 down or 3-0 down. We scored a penalty, and then it went 4-1 straight away. Again, a moment for change. Sack him. Get rid of him. We're only in January. Early days. We can make some big changes here. Early on in the transfer window. Get a new manager in. Get some players in. Let's turn this around. No, we won't. We then go to Man United in the Cup. We lose 3-1 on a Friday night. Again, awful performance. Out of both cup competitions. You know, are we going to make a change? Are we going to sack him? Are we now going to try and focus on the league? No, keep him in his job. Southampton, the worst team in the land, then comes to Goodison. We lose 2-1. Surely he can't stay in his job after that. Surely his position is now untenable. We've lost the last 3 games. 4 out of the last 5 we've lost post the World Cup break. And we've played Wolves at home, Southampton at home, and Brighton at home. No, he gets another game. If Southampton weren't absolutely horrific at the time, which they were, by the way, Southampton were absolutely horrendous at the time when we played them at Goodison and lost to them, by the way. We then played West Ham, who, as I've just said, ultimately only finished 4 points above Everton this season, and that's because they had a really, really poor season. They were really, really poor at this stage. We lost 2-0 to West Ham. And then Frank Lampard lost his job at a point where we were on the 21st of January. 10 days to go until the transfer window was closed. And Frank Lampard loses his job 2 months after he should have lost his job. Now, in that period, you cannot sit there and say to me that somebody at Everton, during that international break, said, let's have a little look at the fixtures from now until the end of January when that transfer window closes, and what are winnable. And they looked and they genuinely believed that Everton would beat Wolves, Brighton, Man United, okay, maybe Southampton, Manchester City. No, we all sat there during that World Cup break and said, this could be a disaster, this. And had the change had been made during that World Cup break, look at the winnable games we had. Wolves at home, new manager bounce, first game for the new manager, first game back after the World Cup break, Goodison absolutely booming, Boxing Day. We'd have won that game comfortably. I've got no issue with saying it. We'd have won that game comfortably. Okay, City away, yeah, one of them. Brighton at home, decent team. Man United, decent team. Southampton at home, we'd have won that game comfortably. No issue with saying it. West Ham away, we might have gone there and got a point. That's 5 extra points. But they persisted with a manager that we all knew was only a matter of time. It wasn't a, do you think Frank Lampard will be sacked? They weren't the conversations we were having during that World Cup break. It was a, when will Frank Lampard be sacked? It wasn't a if, it was a when. We knew it was happening. It was just a case of when would the people at the top of this football club, the owner, and whoever else makes the decision, the CEO, the chairman, when would they have the metaphorical bollocks to make the decision? And the fact is, they left that decision until it was made for them. After that West Ham defeat, when Bill Kenwright and Farhad Moshiri were interviewed in the car park of the London Stadium, and fans were frustrated, and Everton was sitting in 19th in the Premier League table in going into February, that decision was made for them. I don't credit Moshiri for sacking Lampard. Why? Why would I credit him? He sacked him because he had to sack him. He had no other option. I'd have credited him if he'd have sacked him after the game against Bournemouth before the World Cup break. I'd have credited him then, but he didn't. He waited until he had no other option. So no, I don't credit him whatsoever. He then left us in a position where we all knew the January transfer window was one of the most important in the history of this football club. Simple as that. Without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most important in the history of this football club. And Moshiri left us managerless for the last 10 days of that transfer window when we'd already not brought in a single player for the transfer window. We then went out and we got Sean Dyche. And again, another massive sort of bullet point for the failures this season happened. The transfer window slammed shut and Everton had made no signings. The only club in the Premier League to not bring in a single player in January. Not even a loan, not even a young player, not even a 40-year-old striker on loan for the rest of the season that none of us had any hope in and weren't particularly excited about. Not even one of them. Not even one of them signings where you go, well, we've signed a fourth choice goalkeeper. Not even one of them. Nobody. We signed nobody. Dyche come in and was given a matter of days to try and make signings. It didn't happen. I don't blame that on Sean Dyche whatsoever. We then had to play the team that was sat top of the Premier League table when Everton was sat 19th in the Premier League table in Arsenal. And somehow we won that game. 1-0. James Tarkowski, Sean Dyche's first game in charge, is a win. Huge. Absolutely huge win. A big moment. A big moment. And an important moment, because I think it was important that Sean Dyche got that win in his first game. Because you look at the fixtures that we had when Sean Dyche come in. Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa, Leeds, Villa. The pressure on that Leeds game would have been humongous, and it already was anyway, because Leeds, again, a team that were in and around the same position that we were in. But had we have lost to Arsenal and then Liverpool, the pressure on that Leeds game would have been massive, and had we have not won that Leeds game, then Dyche would have started to come under pressure. So that game against Arsenal, that win against Arsenal, was absolutely massive. It was massive because of the pressure it took off him in needing to get that first Everton win. It was hit the ground running, right, we're ready to go now. We then had the derby, we lost that one again at Anfield, no surprise. We then played Leeds, another massive win. Seamus Coleman, the captain, coming up with a big win, massive moments. Fantastic goal to give us the win. We then played Aston Villa at home. We lost that game. And then Dyche made one of the most baffling decisions I've ever seen. A completely out of form, a completely out of favour. Michael Keane is chosen to partner James Tarkowski in our Wednesday night fixture against Arsenal at the Emirates. And that game was exactly how I expected it. A truly embarrassing, abysmal, and quite frankly, dreadful 4-0 defeat. Michael Keane being at the fault for potentially 2, maybe 3 of those goals. Horrendous. Why did the manager make that decision? Who knows? Maybe he was just wanting to try something different. Maybe he'd realised that Conor Cody had been making a couple of mistakes recently, so he wanted to try something different, put Michael Keane in there, seeing how he does. Okay, he wasn't great, he'll probably take him out next week. No, he didn't. He kept him in for 10 games, and we conceded 20 goals in that time. We then went on to play Nottingham Forest. We got a point in that game. one of the most disappointing games of the season, in my opinion. Even though we've had games where we'd lost to Brighton, we'd lost to Bournemouth, we'd lost to Arsenal, that game for me was one of the most disappointing of the season. Everton, by the way, had sat 18th in the Premier League table for 3 games on the bounce now. We were winning that game against Forest twice. 1-0 up with the penalty by Damari Gray. They pulled it back to make it 1-1. And then 2-1 up with Takore's goal. They pulled it back to make it 2-2. Forest, again, similarly to when we played Southampton at Goodison, similarly to when we played West Ham, similarly to when we played Wolves, Forest at this time were horrendous. And we're horrendous for most of the season, by the way. I know they got out of it on the penultimate day, but we're horrendous for most of the season. But we're horrendous on this day. And yet, Everton couldn't see it through. And that's when we knew we had a big problem. We knew we had a big problem anyway, but that's when I looked and obviously I was ultimately wrong, and thankful I was wrong, but that's when I looked and I said, I don't think Everton will win another away game this season. Because if we can't beat a really poor Nottingham Forest team after being ahead twice, I just don't see where we win. We then played Brentford at Goodison. We scored in the opening minute. We ended up sitting back, winning 1-0. Another big win. 3 wins since Sean Dyche had come in. You know, not bad. Not bad. 3 defeats, 3 wins. Not bad at all. Good areas. But again, he was persistent with Michael Keane. And it was certainly a decision that I think was one that could have potentially seen Sean Dyche losing his job, given his persistence with Michael Keane. We then played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Again, another game that we were unfortunate in the sense that, we ultimately we performed very well in that game, and it looked like we were going to lose it. Dyche made a change. He brought on Ellis Sims. Ellis Sims scores from the bench. Unbelievable. A massive point. A massive point in a game that, with 5 minutes to go in that game, we looked like we were losing it. We then do the same the following week against Tottenham. We're sitting 15th, by the way, at this point in the Premier League table. Another game where with 5 minutes to go, we look like we're losing. And Michael Keane, who as I said in the seasonal play ratings, by the way, defensively this season was an absolute sham. An absolute sham. Going forward and attacking-wise, he had a pretty good season. Obviously, Michael Keane absolutely rifles one into the top corner. Unbelievable goal. And Everton get a point in that game. And then we really start to fall down, don't we? And this is when I think that decision to persist with Michael Keane really come to bite the manager on the arse. We then played Man United away. We lost in isolation. Not the worst result in the world, but we weren't able to afford to look at things in isolation because of this situation we were in. That obviously put us back down to 17th, so just above the relegation zone. We then played Fulham at Goodison. We lost that 1-3-1. Again, a game that I remember sitting in my car doing the preview to that game and saying Fulham are safe. They've got no risk of being relegated. They're probably not going to get into Europe. There is no way that Fulham can want to win that game more than Everton. And they absolutely wiped the floor with us. And it was that afternoon that I sort of sat back and said, yeah, I think we're gone. Because it wasn't just the fact that we'd lost. Fulham are a decent team managed by a good manager who we know ourselves. It was the way in which we lost. The performance. There was no real fight. There was no real effort. There was no real desire. There was no real commitment. There was no real anything from those Everton players in a game that was A, very winnable, because, as I said, Fulham were in a very comfortable position, and B, we needed to show something. We needed to go out and battle. We needed to go out and fight. We needed to go out and win that game, and they didn't. They didn't. They turned up and effectively rolled over and looked atrocious. And other than a couple of players, Dwight McNeil, who impressed, and a couple of other players, we looked so bad. So bad. And that was when I really started to worry. We then played Palace 2-0. Again, another one of those days, as I said before, Everton have a couple of these games a season where we go away from home, we draw 0-0, and it's just the most boring 90 minutes of your life. We then lost 4-1 to Newcastle, again at home. You know, over the course of 2 home games, we'd lost 7-2 on aggregate. We were 19th in the Premier League table at this time. At this point, Everton are 19th. With 5 games to go, it was becoming less and less likely, especially with the form that we were on, that we were going to stay up. You know, we'd not won since the beginning of March. We were now in the end of April. And we just lost again, 4-1 to Newcastle. Again, another defeat at home. Really difficult night that. I remember sitting here doing the instant match reaction. Really difficult night. We then played Leicester away on a bank holiday Monday. And we drew 2-2. Kept us 19th in the Premier League table. But what it did was it took 2 points off of Leicester. Everton were 2-1 down. And just conceded a penalty just before half-time. Had that penalty had been scored, it would have been 3-1 and Leicester would have certainly gone on to win that game. Certainly, without a doubt. Everton would have lost a point and Leicester would have gained 2 points. And that would have been the difference in keeping Leicester in the Premier League. When you look at the Premier League table, at the end of it all, Everton managed to stay up at 17th with 36 points and Leicester had 34. Leicester's goal difference was significantly better than Everton's, so had they had won that game, then obviously they would have stayed up on the back of that. That penalty save, when you talk about moments, when you talk about players, when you talk about, you know, players turning up in big moments, and you know, often it's goal scorers when you think about this, isn't it? Often it's, you know, Aguero or, you know, over the years, whether it be, I don't know, Ronaldo or Messi or whoever it may be. Often it's goal scorers who are applauded for them turning up in those big moments and scoring those winning goals in finals. You know, Jared Bowen last night for West Ham. But final winning goal is just as important as that save that Jordan Pickford made to deny James Maddison from the penalty spot. Kept it at 2-1. We come out in the second half. We get the equaliser. We managed to get a point. Puts the pressure on Leicester. Unbelievable. Not the best penalty, but the sheer bollocks it took for Jordan Pickford to stay down the middle, stay centrally to make that save was humongous. And again, another moment to just define how brilliant Jordan Pickford is. He truly is one of the best in the world, and he is light years ahead of any other English goalkeeper. I don't care what anybody says. We then go away to Brighton, and we'd looked at it at this point, and I'd sort of surmised that 5 points would keep you in the Premier League out of those final 4 games of the season. We had Brighton, City, Wolves and Bournemouth. And I'd looked at that and gone, well, Brighton we're probably going to lose. City we're probably going to lose. Bournemouth and Wolves. I'd said we should beat Bournemouth, so that's 3. If we can get a point against Wolves, maybe nick a point against City, that's 5. 4 might be enough, so we'd have to get 4 points in the last 2 games. We then went and won one of those games that I think all of us, and I remember sitting here and doing a specific video about the last 4 games of the season, and I think all of us had that Brighton game down as pretty much a nailed-on defeat. I think I remember saying we could get a point out of that game, and everybody in the comments just saying, Cam, you're being stupid and deluded, we're going to get battered. 5-1 we won. Abdoulaye Doucouré scoring 2. Dwight McNeil scoring 2. A result that has kept Everton in the Premier League. Those 2 games, that draw against Leicester and that penalty save, and that game against Brighton, kept Everton in the Premier League without a shadow of a doubt. Not only the best performance of the season. Not only the best away performance I think I've ever witnessed as an Evertonian, but such an important win against a team, by the way, who were fantastic all season. A team that did that to Everton at Goodison Park, only months before. They did it to Everton at Goodison, absolutely wiping the floor with us. Nobody expected that result and nobody expected that performance. But what we did on that day was perfect. The counter-attacking was perfect. The defending was perfect. It was an absolute perfect performance by everybody on that day. Every time we went forward, and this, I haven't said this about Everton ever, I don't think, certainly not in the time I've been doing the channel, but what we did on that day was every time we went forward, we looked like we were going to score. And every time we went forward, we did score. That game took us to 17th and gave us a huge boost. We then played Man City. We lost, expected. We then went into the final 2 games of the season, and I remember thinking, right, beat Wolves and we're safe. We're absolutely safe here. If we can't beat them, don't lose. Another Tottenham, another Chelsea, another Forest earlier on in the season. We're losing the game. 10 minutes to go, Jordan Pickford makes a massive save. I remember listening to the commentator say, that save could keep Everton in the Premier League. And I remember thinking, lad, we're literally 1-0 down, we're going to lose this game. How does that save make any difference? Yerry Mina pops up. At this point, the manager obviously had made the change to take Michael Keane out the team. The right change. He'd understood that it wasn't the right decision in the first place, and he'd accepted that it wasn't working, so he made the change. Yerry Mina pops up, thanks to a Michael Keane assist, by the way, who'd come on to play right back because of Nathan Patterson's injury. We get the goal. 1-1, a point. We then only had to hope that Leeds lost their next game against West Ham, which they did. And then we needed Leicester to lose, and then all we needed was a draw on the final day. Leicester were playing Newcastle United away from home. They somehow managed to get a point. Somehow, don't know how, don't know where, but they somehow managed to get a point. But that meant that all Everton had to do going into the final day of the season was win. Beat Bournemouth at Goodison Park, a team that had beaten us once at Goodison in the last 100 odd years. All as we had to do was win. And we did that. And I'm not going to make a big drama of it. I'm not going to make a big scene of it. It was a horrible game. It was a horrible evening. It was a dreadful position to be in. Abdoulaye Doucouré, who we've already championed, on a series of videos over the last few weeks about his performances this season and his unbelievable contributions towards the ends of it, pops up with a massive goal to keep Everton in the Premier League. Signs his new contract extension a couple of days before. It was only ever going to be Abdoulaye Doucouré. Brilliant goal, brilliant moment, and Everton stay up. Not the jubilation, not the joy, not the happiness, not the overriding, oh my god, this is amazing of last season. No. Pure anger and frustration that this is the position that we were in. However, pure thankfulness and gratitude, because after that defeat to Newcastle, after that defeat to Fulham, I was pretty certain Everton would be relegated. But we weren't. Tactically, that game against Brighton was one of the best tactical performances I've ever seen of any Everton team. And Sean Dyche deserves an immense amount of credit for that. Everybody played their part. From Jordan Pickford, the penalty save, the save against Wolves, to Abdoulaye Doucouré, his goals against Forest, goals against Brighton, goals against Bournemouth. Everybody played their part. Fans, the players, the manager. The only people that didn't play their part in keeping Everton in the Premier League, and in fact played their part in putting Everton in these positions in the first place, are the people in charge and the people that make the decisions. And those people simply have to go. Simply have to go. This cannot happen again. We can't allow this to happen again. And as a fan base, we shouldn't be willing to allow this to happen again. Everton were fortunate this season. Very, very fortunate. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The fact that we went into the final day of the season with it in our own hands is baffling. Absolutely baffling. I just don't understand how we managed that. Baffling. We mightn't be as lucky next season if nothing changes. What we can't afford to do, and this goes back to now, by the way, back to now. You know, it was this time last year that Everton sat on their hands and didn't make any signings and didn't plan for any players in the future. What we can't do is sign our second player at the end of July when the pre-season's done. We need to be proactive. We need to be, we need to have a plan. We need to know what we're doing. First and foremost, we need to get these people out because they're not good enough. And with them in charge, we'll be in the same position next season. It's as simple as that. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. I've been talking for over an hour and my throat is in bits. If you have enjoyed this one, please leave a like. It does mean a massive, massive amount to me. Please do subscribe as well. We will be back with a Toffees Today video tomorrow, so don't forget to look out for that one. It would mean a massive, massive amount to me. If you want to hear my opinions on each individual player this season, then go and check out either our Keep, Sell or Loan video, or, in fact, and check out both of them, the seasonal player ratings, where we go more in depth about each individual player's performance. But yeah, another horrendous season. And hopefully we don't have to deal with that again. But big thanks for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. And we'll see you later.